My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old, and for most of my life, I was the kind of woman people talked about, but never really saw, not as a person, not as someone who was breaking. Slowly, quietly, right in front of them, they saw what they wanted to see: a polite smile, a dependable worker, a strong woman. That word strong, they use it like a compliment. But what it really means is, God help me, I did. I'm recording this from my kitchen table. Same table I've had for over 30 years. There's a crack running down the middle of it now. Split clean through the wood. I never fixed it. I guess I just got used to broken things staying broken. Funny how that happens. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I believed life would be fair if I just worked hard enough. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. My father worked construction. My mother cleaned houses. We didn't have much, but we had rules. Work hard, stay quiet, don't complain, especially if you're a woman. Because if you complain, people don't hear your pain, they hear your attitude. I carried that lesson into my marriage. I met Daniel when I was 24. He had a way of looking at you like you mattered, like you were the only person in the room. I didn't realize back then, that kind of attention isn't always love. Sometimes, it's control wearing a nice smile. At first, everything felt right. We built a life, had 2 kids. I worked mornings at a diner, then evenings cleaning offices downtown. Daniel worked in sales. At least, that's what he told people. What he didn't tell them was how often he came home angry, how small things would set him off. A cold dinner, a bill in the mail, a question he didn't feel like answering, and me. I stayed quiet, because that's what good women did. That's what strong women did, right? I remember one night, clear as day. I had just come home from my second shift. My feet were swollen, my back felt like it was breaking in half, and all I wanted was to sit down for 5 minutes. Just 5. But Daniel was waiting, sitting at the table, just like this one. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. He just looked at me and said, "You're late." I told him I had to stay longer at work. Someone didn't show up. He didn't ask if I was tired. Didn't ask if I was okay. You think just because you work, you're equal now. That was the first time I felt it. Not the anger, not the fear, but something colder, something heavier. The realization that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. But I didn't leave. That's the part people don't understand when they look at women like me. They say, "Why didn't you just walk away?" Like it's that simple. Like walking away doesn't cost you everything. Your home, your stability, your children's sense of safety, yourself. So I stayed, and I worked harder, because somewhere deep inside, I believed if I could just prove my worth, he would see me. But here's the truth no one tells you. When someone benefits from your silence, they will never ask you to speak. Years passed like that. Quiet arguments, long shifts, empty apologies. I became invisible in my own life. At home, I was too much. At work, I was not enough. Ah yes. Work. That's a whole different story. You'd think earning your own money would give you respect. It doesn't, not always. Sometimes, it just gives people another reason to test how much you're willing to tolerate. By the time I turned 38, I landed a job at an insurance office downtown. It felt like a step up, clean desk, regular hours, a chance to breathe, or so I thought. My manager Richard liked to call me reliable. Why? Again, that word sounds nice, doesn't it? But what it really meant was, give her more work. She won't complain. I stayed late almost every night, skipped lunches, covered for coworkers who didn't even bother to thank me, and when promotion time came, they gave it to a younger man I had trained myself. I remember standing in that office, smiling, actually smiling, while something inside me cracked a little deeper. Richard pulled me aside and said, "Margaret, you're invaluable where you are." Invaluable. Another beautiful word that means nothing. Because if you're truly invaluable, they don't keep you stuck. That day I went to the restroom, locked the door, and just stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, older than I should have, like someone who had been carrying a weight no one else could see. And that's when I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just exhausted, I was disappearing. But the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally understood what my life had become, didn't happen at work. And it didn't happen during one of Daniel's quiet, cutting remarks. It happened on a Tuesday evening, completely ordinary, the kind of day you forget, until it becomes the day you never forget again. I walked into the house, set my bag down, and heard voices in the living room. Daniel's voice. And my daughter's, Brianna. She was visiting. Something about the tone felt off. Not loud, not angry, just wrong. I stepped closer, and that's when I heard it. Her voice, sharp, cold, and so sure of itself. Mom chose this life. Nobody forced her. I don't think I breathed for a full 10 seconds. Maybe longer. Because in that moment, I realized something worse than being unseen by the world. I had been erased, even in my own children's eyes. And that was the beginning of the end of the woman I used. I didn't walk into that living room, not right away. I just stood there, in the hallway, listening to my own daughter explain my life like it was a choice I had proudly made. Mom chose this life. Nobody forced her. Her words didn't sound emotional. They sounded practiced, like something she had said before. Or worse, something she had been taught. Daniel didn't correct her. That part hurt more than anything. He just let it sit there in the air. Like truth, like fact. Like I wasn't even worth defending. I stepped back quietly before they could see me. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe survival, or maybe, after years of being overlooked, you learn how to disappear without making a sound. I went into the kitchen and stood at the sink, staring out the window like I always did. Same backyard, same worn fence, same silence. Except this time, something inside me wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud. Too loud. I remember thinking, if even my own daughter believes this, then what exactly have I been protecting all these years? When Brianna finally walked into the kitchen, she smiled like nothing had happened. Hey Mom, like we were normal, like everything was fine. I smiled back, because that's what I had trained myself to do. Hide first, feel later. We made small talk, work, weather, her life. She barely asked about mine, and I didn't offer, because for the first time, I realized she wasn't really listening anyway. That night, after she left, I sat at the same kitchen table. The cracked one, and I didn't cry. That's important, because people think the breaking point is when you cry. It's not. The real breaking point is when you stop feeling the need to cry at all. Daniel walked in, grabbed a beer, and turned on the TV like it was just another night. Like I hadn't just heard my entire life reduced to a decision I supposedly made. I asked him one question. Simple, calm. Do you think I chose this life? He didn't even look at me. Just shrugged, and said, you stayed, didn't you? That was it. No anger, no yelling, no dramatic moment. Just a sentence. Flat, cold, final. And somehow, that hurt more than anything he had ever said before. Because for the first time, I believed him. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling for hours, not thinking about leaving, not planning anything, just replaying everything. Years of silence, years of swallowing words, years of making myself smaller so everyone else could feel comfortable. And suddenly, it all felt very clear. Not fair, not right, but clear. I had spent my entire life being understood by everyone, except myself. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had changed. Because that's what women like me do. We carry earthquakes inside us, and still show up on time. But something had changed. I could feel it. In the way I walked. In the way I looked at people. In the way I stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. It started small. Almost invisible. Around 10:30 a.m., one of my coworkers dropped a stack of files on my desk. Margaret, can you handle these? I've got a lunch meeting. Normally, I would have said yes. No hesitation. No question. But that day, I looked at the files, then at her, and for the first time in 40 years, I said one simple word. No. She blinked, like she didn't hear me right. I'm sorry. I didn't raise my voice, didn't get emotional. Didn't explain myself. I said no. The silence that followed felt louder than any argument I'd ever had. People looked up from their desks, not because I was loud, but because I wasn't who they thought I was. She laughed awkwardly. Wow. Okay. Didn't know it was that kind of day. That's the thing. The moment you stop being easy to use, people act like you've changed. I went back to my work. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding like I had just done something dangerous. And maybe I had, because once you say no for the first time, you can't unknow what it feels like. Later that afternoon, Richard called me into his office. Of course he did. He leaned back in his chair. Do you mean I'm not doing other people's work for them? His smile tightened. You've always been a team player. There it was again. That expectation, that quiet demand disguised as praise. I took a breath, slow, controlled. I've also always been overlooked, underpaid, and passed over. You could feel the air shift in that room. He wasn't used to this version of me. No one was. After decades of silence, now it was emotional. I'm not being emotional, I said. I'm being honest. And that's when I saw it. For just a second, that flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Because people who benefit from your silence don't know what to do with your truth. He cleared his throat. Well, let's revisit this conversation later. Translation. Let's hope you go back to being quiet. But I didn't. Something had started. Something I couldn't stop anymore. That evening, I didn't rush home. I sat in my car for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, just breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what needed to be done, or who needed me, or how to avoid conflict. I was thinking about one question: what do I want? And the truth? I didn't know, because no one had ever asked me that before. Not my husband, not my children, not my boss, not even me. But I knew one thing, clearer than anything else. I couldn't keep living like this. I just didn't know yet. It was going to cost more than I was ready for. The day I stopped asking for permission, the first real consequence came faster than I expected. It always does. People don't mind your silence for years, but the moment you change, they react like you've betrayed them. 3 days after I told Richard no, I was called into HR, not for anything dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just that quiet, polite tone companies use when they're about to remind you exactly where you stand. Margaret, we've received feedback that your attitude has shifted. Attitude, there it was again. I sat across from a woman young enough to be my daughter, listening to her explain professionalism to me like I hadn't spent decades holding that office together. We value teamwork here, she said. I nodded slowly. I've been carrying your idea of teamwork for 12 years, I replied. By myself. She didn't like that. You could tell. Not because I was wrong, but because I wasn't easy anymore. By the end of the meeting, nothing was resolved, but everything was understood. I walked out knowing one thing for sure. They weren't going to fire me, not yet, but they were going to make it uncomfortable enough that I might leave on my own. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of that. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Daniel wasn't there, which meant I could think. I went into the bedroom and opened the closet, not to clean, not to organize, just to look. 40 years of my life was hanging in that closet. Dresses I wore to keep peace, clothes I bought on sale because my needs always came last. Outfits that fit the version of me everyone expected, not the one I actually was. I reached for a coat I hadn't worn in years. Gray, heavy, practical, safe. And for some reason, I felt angry just looking at it. Because that coat wasn't just fabric. It was a symbol of every time I chose comfort over truth, silence over voice, acceptance over I took it off the hanger and dropped it on the floor. That might sound small to you, insignificant, but for me, it felt like the first honest thing I had done in decades. That night, Daniel came home late. I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. He noticed right away something was different. You can always tell when someone stops shrinking around you. What's going on? He asked. I didn't answer immediately, not because I was afraid, but because, for the first time, I was choosing my words carefully. I'm done, P. He laughed. Actually laughed. Like I had just told a joke. With what he said, I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as my husband. Not as the father of my children. But as a man who had gotten very comfortable, benefiting from my silence. With all of it, I said. This life. This arrangement. This version of me. His expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. You're not making sense, he said. No, I replied calmly. I'm finally making sense. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Unfamiliar. You think you can just, what? Start over, he said. That word again. Think, like everything I was saying was unrealistic. Unstable. Emotionally. I don't think, I said. I know, that was the moment. The exact moment. When the balance shifted, not because I raised my voice, not because I threatened anything, but because I stopped needing his approval to exist. You're being ridiculous, he snapped. And there it was. The first crack in his control. I stood up slowly. Not in anger. Not in fear. In certainty. I've spent 40 years being reasonable, I said. And all it got me was invisible. He didn't have a response for that. Not a real one. So he did what men like him always do when they lose control of the conversation. He tried to regain control of the narrative. You're overreacting, he said. You've always been like this. I almost smiled. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. When people say you've always been like this, what they really mean is, you've always tolerated this. Not anymore, I said. That night, we didn't argue. We didn't yell. We didn't resolve anything. But something ended, quietly, completely. And the next morning, I did something that would have terrified the old version of me. I didn't go to work. I called in, for the first time in 12 years. The silence on the other end of the phone said everything. Are you feeling okay? My manager asked. Yes, I said. I'm starting to. And I hung up before he could say anything else. I spent that day alone, not cleaning, not fixing things, just sitting, thinking, breathing, and slowly, piece by piece, I started to see my life for what it really was. Not a series of sacrifices, not a story of strength, but a pattern. A pattern of being overlooked, because I allowed it. A pattern of being used, because I never said no. A pattern of being dismissed, because I stayed. That realization, it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels devastating, because it forces you to face the one truth no one wants to admit. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't what people did to you. It's what you allowed, just to survive. But here's the thing about realization. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you have two choices. Go back to sleep, or wake up completely. I chose to wake up, and that's when everything got harder. Because change doesn't just affect you, it exposes everyone around you. And not everyone is ready to be seen. Part 4, when everything fell apart and finally made sense. Change doesn't arrive gently. It doesn't knock politely and wait for you to be ready. It crashes into your life and forces everyone around you to show you exactly who they are. The first person to react wasn't Daniel. It was my daughter. Brianna called me 2 days after I stopped going to work. Her voice wasn't warm. It wasn't concerned. It was irritated. Mom, what's going on? She said. Dad says you're acting different. Different? It's funny how quickly people notice change when it stops benefiting them. I am different, I said calmly. There was a pause, not long, but long enough to feel the shift. Okay, but like, what does that mean? She asked. I could hear it in her tone. That discomfort. That quiet pressure for me to go back to being predictable. Easy. It means I'm not living the same way anymore, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Mom, you're scaring me. No. I wasn't scaring her. I was confusing her. Because for her entire life, I had been consistent. Always available. Always accommodating. Always putting myself last. And now, I wasn't. I'm not trying to scare you, I said. I'm trying to be honest. That word again. Honest. People say they want honesty, but what they really want is comfort. Dad says you're overreacting, she said. Of course he did. Does he? I replied. Yeah, he said you've just been stressed and I've been silent, I interrupted gently. For 40 years. She didn't respond. Because there's no easy reply to that. I need you to understand something, I continued. My life didn't just happen to me, but it also wasn't as simple as I chose it. Her breathing changed slightly. I could hear it. I did what I thought I had to do, I said, to keep this family together, to survive, to be acceptable. Mom, she said softly now. I didn't mean it like that the other day. But she did. Maybe she didn't understand it fully. But she meant it. I know, I said, and I did. Because she didn't create that belief. She inherited it. From watching me, from watching him, from watching a world that teaches women to endure and calls it strength. I'm not blaming you, I said. But I am asking you to see me as a person, not just your mother. Silence. And then, quietly, I don't know how to do that. That hurt. But it was honest. Neither did I said. And that's the problem. We didn't argue. We didn't resolve anything. But something important happened in that conversation. For the first time, we weren't pretending. And sometimes, that's where real change begins. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual, which meant one thing. He was ready to confront me. He didn't sit down, didn't ease into it. What did you tell Brianna? He demanded. I stayed seated at the table, calm. The truth, I said. He scoffed. You're turning her against me now. There it was. The deflection, the shift. This wasn't about me changing. It was about him losing control of the story. I'm not turning anyone against you, I said. I'm just not protecting you anymore. That landed hard. His jaw tightened. You're being selfish. I almost smiled again. That word? Selfish. The moment a woman chooses herself, that's the word people reach for. I've been selfless long enough, I said. And look where it got you. He shot back. I nodded slowly. Yes, it did. He didn't expect that, because he thought shame would pull me back. But it didn't. It pushed me forward. So what now? He asked. You just walk away from everything. I stood up. Not to argue, not to fight, but to be clear. I'm not walking away from everything, I said. I'm walking away from what's been destroying me. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. You won't last on your own, he said. That one was designed to hit deep. Because fear has always been the strongest chain. But this time, it didn't hold. I already survived the hardest part, I said quietly. And what's that? He asked. Living a life that wasn't mine. That was the moment. The exact moment. He realized I wasn't coming back. Not to the version of me he understood. Not to the silence he depended on. And when that realization hits, people don't always react with understanding. Sometimes, they react with distance. He didn't argue after that. Didn't shout. Didn't try to stop me. He just pulled away. And honestly, that hurt in a different way. Because part of me had always believed that if I finally spoke up, he might fight for me. But he didn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I made 2 decisions. The first one was about my job. I walked into that office for the last time. Not angry. Not emotionally clear. Richard looked surprised to see me. Maybe he thought I'd come back. Quieter. More cooperative. He was wrong. I'm resigning, I said, placing the letter on his desk. He blinked. Margaret, let's not be hasty. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm just done being undervalued. He tried to talk, tried to smooth it over, but I wasn't there to negotiate. I was there to leave. And for the first time in my life, walking away didn't feel like losing. It felt like choosing. The second decision, that one was bigger, harder, and it changed everything. I went home, packed a small suitcase, and stood in that doorway for a long time. 40 years of memories behind me, and a future I didn't fully understand. In front of me, I didn't cry. I just took a breath, stepped outside, and closed the door, not knowing if I would ever come back. The life I finally chose. I didn't have a plan. That's the part people don't talk about. They think change comes with clarity, direction, certainty. It doesn't. Sometimes, it just comes with a suitcase, a quiet goodbye, and a heart that's finally had enough. I drove for hours that day. No destination in mind. Just distance. From the house, from the silence, from the version of me that had lived there for far too long. By the time the sun started setting, I pulled into a small roadside motel. Nothing special. Faded sign, flickering light, the kind of place people pass without noticing. Funny, I had spent most of my life feeling exactly like that. The room smelled like old carpet and cheap detergent. The bed creaked when I sat down, and for the first time in 40 years, there was no one there to judge me, no one to expect anything from me, no one to silence me, just me. I sat on the edge of that bed and waited for the fear, for the regret, for the voice in my head telling me I had made a mistake. But it didn't come. What came instead was something I didn't recognize at first. Peace. Not loud, not overwhelming, just quiet, steady, real. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't lost. I was free. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. That alone felt strange. I made a cup of terrible motel coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sky slowly change color. And for the first time in decades, I asked myself that question again. What do I want? But this time, I didn't feel empty. I felt curious. So I started small. Found a short-term rental in a nearby town. Nothing fancy. Just a small one-bedroom apartment with white walls and a window that let in too much light. I bought a second-hand chair, a simple table, a set of dishes that didn't match. And you know what? It felt like building a life. Not the one I was given. Not the one I was expected to maintain. But one I was choosing. Piece by piece. I got a part-time job at a local library. Quiet work. Simple. No one expected me to be everything. No one needed me to disappear. And slowly, something inside me started to return. Not the old version of me, but someone new. Someone who spoke without apologizing. Who rested without guilt. Who said no, and didn't explain why. Weeks passed. Then months, and one afternoon, I got a call. Brianna? I stared at the phone for a long time before answering. Hi, Mom. Her voice was different, softer, careful. Hi, I replied. I've been thinking. A lot, she said. I didn't interrupt. I didn't understand before, she continued. I thought, you were just okay with everything. I closed my eyes for a moment. I wasn't, I said quietly. I know that now, she replied. And then, something I never expected to hear. I'm sorry. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. I've been in a relationship, she continued. And lately, I started noticing things. The way he talks to me, the way I stay quiet, my chest tightened. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. Change doesn't just affect you, it echoes. I think I was becoming you, she said. I took a deep breath. No, I said gently. You were becoming what you were taught. Silence. But you can choose differently, I added. Another pause. That's why I'm calling, she said. I want to learn how. And just like that, after all those years of feeling invisible, I was finally seen. Not as a role, not as a responsibility, but as a person, with a story that mattered. We didn't fix everything in that one call. Life doesn't work like that. But something shifted. And this time, it wasn't breaking. It was rebuilding. A few weeks later, she came to visit. When I opened the door, she looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with confusion, but with respect. You look lighter, she said. I smiled. I am. We sat by the window, talking for hours. About life, about choices, about the things women are told to accept, and the things we shouldn't. And for the first time, I didn't filter my words. I told her the truth, all of it. Not to make her angry, not to turn her against anyone, but to give her something I never had, clarity. Because the truth is, women like me weren't weak. We were conditioned, taught to endure, taught to sacrifice, taught to stay. and then praised for surviving what should have never been normalized. But survival is not the same as living, and I learned that at 63 years old. Late, maybe, but not too late, because here's what I know now, clearer than anything I've ever known in my life. It is never too late to choose yourself. Not when you're 30, not when you're 50, not even when the world has already decided who you're supposed to be. Because the moment you stop asking for permission is the moment your life actually begins. So if you're listening to this, and you feel that quiet voice inside you, the one you've been ignoring for years, listen to it. Don't wait 40 years like I did. Don't confuse silence with strength, and don't let anyone convince you that enduring pain is the same thing as love. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old. And for the first time in my life, I am finally living a life that belongs to me. End of story.